I've been using the Bambu Lab printers for just over a year now, and in this video I want to talk about, are they worthwhile picking up, especially if you're into tabletop gaming or you're just a tabletop hobbyist. Full disclosure, no one has sent me these printers. I've not been sponsored. I've never been sponsored by Bambu Labs. Bought these with my own money, so this should be as unbiased as I possibly can get. Now, like I said, I've been using these for just over a year. I started off with the Bambu Lab P1S, then got myself a second one, and in that time I've also had a Bambu Lab A1, which then got recalled because it was a fire hazard, and then I picked up the little tiny A1 Mini that's behind me. Each of these printers has been printing a hell of a lot for the channel. The one that I started off with has 2,591 hours worth of use on it, and the other ones aren't far off it. So in this video, I'll cover off the good, the bad, and just the downright I want to throw it out the window stuff. So that way, if you are looking to buy one of these machines, you can make an informed decision. Now, the short answer is yes, these are totally worth it. If you are a tabletop hobbyist and you're into miniature wargaming and everything else, I feel like almost every single person could benefit from either having an A1 or an A1 Mini. They're almost perfect machines. But the long answer is, obviously, it is more complicated. Now, in the time that I've been using them, I have printed off a whole host of different things. Like this sort of thing here, which is for tabletop gaming. Also multi-material parts as well, so that way they all come off without having to do any painting. Random helmets and props, which we'll get into. But yeah, practical things like game aids and rulers. Also practical things for around the house, which have been really handy. I printed off different display cases, different stands and holders for my keyboards, bits for my camera, loads of practical parts too. And then of course, for the kids, loads of flexible toys, like so many of these. Recently, a whole bunch of Halloween decorations. So even though I'm talking about these printers from a tabletop hobbyist perspective, so many people can benefit from these. So let's kick it off with the good stuff. And the good stuff is that the quality is fantastic on these. Right out of the box with very, very little prep or tinkering, almost anybody can just plug this in, get it set up, and you are pretty much good to go, and you will get really good quality. Now, I will be doing a video in the future about how I print tabletop terrain because it's like my most requested video. But I honestly don't do much tinkering when it comes to the default settings. Almost everything is as close to what it was when I first got it, but it's a fantastic machine. There is so much good quality that you get from this. Things like tabletop terrain comes out and it looks amazing. Even at the default 0.2mm layer height, I think it looks absolutely fantastic. I tend to print things in 0.12mm layer height, and I get even better results from that. Things like toys, just this windmill, for example, that I've got here, this helmet, and a whole load of other B-roll that I'll have up on screen for you to use, just looks great. And it kind of still boggles my mind that getting something like this that is almost literally, it gets delivered to your door, you plug it in, you download your software onto your computer, and then you start printing, it comes out and looks great. Now, to coincide with that, it's really easy to use as well. So not only do you get really good quality from all of your different parts, but it's so easy that pretty much anybody can pick it up. Over the past year or so, I've had so many people who've ended up buying one of these when they've come around to visit my house, because they see what you can do. It tends to be, they come over for my kids' parties and stuff, and I print off loads of random things. For my daughter's 4th birthday, I printed off a Disney castle, loads of unicorns and wands, and like every single parent there was like, you didn't print this, no way. And then I show them it working, and the next thing I know, they can figure out a use case in their day-to-day lives. They're like, actually, this would be really handy for this, or this would be really handy for my job. And they go away and they end up picking up something like the A1 Mini or the A1. It's crazy. Because when I show people as well how easy it is just to find the models from something like Thingiverse, My Mini Factory, wherever else, download it and pop it into the Bambu slicer and then get it printed, they're just blown away by how easy it is. Literally anybody could start printing with this and it doesn't take too much tinkering. So the quality is absolutely fantastic. I just don't think I can overemphasize how good the quality is when it comes to this. If you're printing miniatures, not so great. You can get some really good looking miniatures, I'm not going to lie. There's some people out there who have really dialed in the settings. They're not going to be quite as good as resin printing, but the difference is it's so much safer doing something like this. So just bear that in mind. You're probably not going to get the best tabletop miniatures like 32, 28mm scale or like your units and stuff. Terrain looks amazing. All these props and stuff look amazing. You can tinker and get those things looking close. I'll have some B-roll of a Space Marine I've just done and also a tank that I've been trying out. And you can get some really impressive quality, but I don't think it's quite there for tabletop miniatures. Moving across onto reliability and all the bits where you maybe want to do a bit more tinkering. In all the time I've had them, apart from the A1 which got recalled because of the little cable on the back, which has now been fixed, I've not had any particular issues with these machines. So my original P1S, which is the one that sat there behind me with the 2,591 hours on it, I've done no real maintenance apart from like lubricating a few bits and bobs on there. I've not had to swap out the nozzle, I've not had to swap out the gears or anything like that. Nothing's gone faulty on it, nothing's broken down, touch wood. So that's fantastic. The P1S that's right behind me, which is the one that I got about a month or two after the original P1S, I have swapped out the nozzle and the gear inside of it. Really easy to do. But I had to do it because there's wear and tear on the parts over time. And because I've tried so many different filaments over the past year that have been sent out to me by different manufacturers and everything, some of them haven't been great on that and they have obviously caused a little bit more wear and tear. Now, obviously, it's not good when you have to go in and replace your parts and everything. But at the end of the day, these are machines. There's lots of moving parts on there. There's bits that will wear down over time. So you do need to bear that in mind. The good thing about it is that it's really easy to do. Swapping between your two different nozzles, for example. So this is a 0.2mm layer height one, and this is a 0.4mm layer height. Basically, you go in there, you pop the cap off. Obviously, make sure your power's turned off because otherwise you could short it out. And then remove a couple of screws, remove it, pop the new one in, and just do what you did in reverse. And you're good to go with swapping things out. The gear extruders and all of that inside of it, a little bit more complicated. But all in all, it takes about 10 to 15 minutes to swap out that whole unit and pop a new one in, which I did. And it's relatively inexpensive as well. You can buy all of these replacement parts from Bambu Lab's website, which I think is fantastic. It's easy enough to get hold of all the different bits, which is good. And their video guides are really good when you find the right video guide. I find the Bambu Lab like do-it-yourself guides and everything, although they're really detailed and they are really helpful, sometimes it's hard finding the right one because they're just labelled weird. They're probably labelled correctly, but in my head, the techno jargon and all of that goes with these printers doesn't always marry up with what I think it's called. So it's probably on me, but just bearing in mind. So maintenance aside, yes, I've had to do some maintenance on one of the printers, but it didn't take me long. It was very easy to do and figure out. So there's a lot of really good stuff when it comes to this. They're great quality, they're easy to use, they're pretty easy to maintain, and so far for me at least, on all of my machines, they have been really reliable. They've not broken down or anything like that. However, there's some stuff on there that is falling into the, I guess, meh or bad area. And I'll just go through all of those that I can think of that I've had over the sort of past year that have been niggling issues or just annoyances. The first one is that the screen consistency between these devices is odd. And I'm not going to go into a full breakdown of P1S versus A1 and A1 Mini, but the screen on the P1S and the P1P that you can also buy is just crap. It's like a little Kindle e-reader screen, and that's frustrating. On something like the A1 and the A1 Mini, they've got a really nice full color touchscreen, and it means you can interact with the printer so much more without having to go to something like the application on your phone or the application on your laptop or computer. Don't get me wrong, their application is really good, but I have found myself wanting to use the screen so much more since I got the A1 and the A1 Mini. Originally it didn't bother me because the P1S, I just didn't ever interact with that screen. I used the application more, but then having that flexibility of having a screen on the device just means things are so much faster. Getting things reprinted, for example, finding an old file that you want to print is so much easier rather than having to mess around with that awful Kindle touchscreen. I'll close it off there for the comparisons between them, but it's just something to bear in mind when you're looking at it. I do really like having that full touchscreen. It makes a big difference. Another really irritating thing, which I hope gets ironed out in their future versions or iterations of the machines, is none of them are very good at using a whole spool of filament, at least in my experience. The A1 and the A1 Mini are pretty bad. When they get down to around about the last 10% of filament on a spool, I always find that it just can't take it. It triggers the run out sensor because, I don't know, gravity seems to get in the way of it, and it's really frustrating. The P1S using the AMS on the back of it also tends to have this issue. As the spool starts to run out, it then starts to stop feeding it in there because it pulls it up and it gets stuck. The only one that I'm having any success with is the P1S behind me, and that's because I'm not using anything related to Bambu Lab. I've just got it in a filament dryer, and it basically takes it from that all the way, which is fantastic. So to get around this, you can get around it, obviously. There are 3D printed upgrades that you can get. For the AMS especially, there's one in there which will stop the spools from moving up, and it means they lock them in place, so it will finish off using a whole roll. Same with the A1 Mini as well, so I've printed off a larger converter for the arm, and that seems to get around the issue. Or you can use something like a filament dryer or just anything else that will let it sit alongside it and just rotate slowly, and it seems to fix the issue. Hopefully it gets fixed in a future iteration, but if you're running into that issue, don't worry, you are not alone. It does seem to be something that just exists, and I've seen a lot of other users have that same sort of issue as well. So the resume after a power outage is also really hit and miss. It sometimes works and it sometimes doesn't. I live in an area where we do get power outages, and I'm going to get a backup battery for all of my machines at some point in the very near future. But what I found with them is, yes, they will auto-resume, but sometimes it doesn't make sense. What I've found is I'll come back out to my printers and they won't recognize that there's been a power outage. They're back on and everything's working as it should, but it's just back ready to print. If I then turn the machine off and on again, it then comes back and says, hey, you've had a power outage. Do you want to resume your last print? And say, well, why did that just happen? That's so weird. I've also had an issue with the machine as well, the P1S, where it has completely, not died, but it's gotten stuck, completely crashed after a power outage. So when I've then come back out, turned it off and then back on again, the screen's completely unresponsive. It won't do anything. You can press it on the screen, nothing happens. If you go on the app, it's also unresponsive. The machine's on and stuff is displaying on the screen, but nothing's working. Now, to get around this, for anyone who does run into this issue, I found that if I just power cycled it, so I pulled the power plug out completely, left it for about 10 to 20 seconds, plugged it back in, it then powers back on, and the screen's completely blank at that stage. Leave it. So I had to leave it for about 5 minutes or so. I came back and it was ready to resume printing. Again, it would resume printing, but it had to go through that process to get there. So the resume print function works, but it is really weird and sometimes unreliable as well. So just bear that in mind if you do live in an area where you get power outages and you're going to be using the machines for business or something like that, and you need them to be reliable, you might want to get something like a UPS or a backup battery. Another couple of things to consider if you're looking at getting one of these and you're going to have it in your house is they're loud, especially that. That, I said in my first video about it, is it sounds like getting a toddler and putting a box on them and trying to put them in a cage or something. It is really loud, it rattles, it's fast, and you kind of have to expect it. It's a very, very fast machine. It prints great quality very quickly, but it does it pretty loudly. It's worthwhile bearing in mind if you're going to be using it in your house, it is loud. And if you've got a significant other or other people who live in your house, they might not appreciate that you're printing off some really fun things because they're going to kill you because it's a loud machine. That seems to be less of an issue with the A1 Mini and the A1. And that's because, again, it's a different type of machine. It's not quite as fast as something like the P1S or the P1P, but it's quieter. The only thing that I will say against that is the fan is louder on something like the A1 and the A1 Mini. It always feels like a bit more of a high-pitched sound. You can hear it, but it's only when the fan kicks into full blast, which isn't all the time. So if you are going to be putting one of these printers into your house where there's going to be other people around, something like the A1 or the A1 Mini might be worthwhile considering if you want to avoid having a super duper noisy machine. And perhaps the final thing that's not necessarily a bad point, but a bit of a meh point, and this could affect certain people more than others, is the build plate size. They still don't do one which comes with a really big build plate and build platform, and I can't wait for them to finally do that. Hopefully they do that at some point in the new year. There's been loads of hints and stuff like that, but for now, you've got two sizes. You've got this medium size of the P1S, the P1P, all of their top end models, and also the A1. And then you've got the baby size, which is this size here, and this is on the A1 Mini. This is great, and so is the one behind me, the P1S and everything else, for things like terrain. You can get a lot of stuff printed on any of these. If you're going to be printing a lot and you want larger pieces like this, for example, then you are going to want to go for the A1, the P1P, or the P1S, or one of the more premium machines. But if you are happy with smaller buildings and printing things off in different parts, then the A1 Mini is really good. But again, I'll save that for another video. The reason I bring it up in this video is if you're then also looking to print off things like this, props, you need to print them off in different parts. You can't just stick this on the printer and have it print because it doesn't fit, unfortunately. It just is too big. Some masks, for example, they're going to be fine. But if you're doing things like props or anything that is quite large, you do need to bear in mind that you're going to need to slice it up and you're going to have to print them off in multiple parts and then piece them together. Not the end of the world when the trade-off is you get speed, quality, convenience, and all of that. But as of right now, they don't do a larger printer. I can't wait for that to happen. Just throwing that out there just so you're aware. So we've gone through the good, we've gone through the meh, now on to the downright frustrating, and that is the AMS. Now the AMS is a device that allows you to put 4 different types of filament into your machine. So that way it will automatically switch between those depending how you program it. So for example, this road piece here, it prints off with the grey, I've also got the black for the road, and then I've also got the white stripes down the middle as well. When it works, it is fantastic. It's such an ingenious little thing. There are 2 different AMSs. You've got the AMS, which goes with your P1S, your P1P, your X1, or your premium machines. And then you've got the AMS Lite, which goes with the A1 Mini and the A1. Again, I'm not going to go into a full breakdown, one versus the other. I personally prefer the AMS Lite because of its design and its functionality. You can only use one AMS Lite with the machine, whereas with the AMS, you can use multiples. So you can have multiple AMS units running with something like the P1P and the AMS, which is the big difference there. However, the big thing that I found, I mentioned this already about how when it starts to run out, things can go a little bit weird, is the AMS as it is currently, without any 3D printed upgrades and stuff like that, as it starts to get to the end of that roll, it can start to just get really, really frustrating, and it doesn't always take it. It causes jams to happen, causes things just to... it needs more babysitting than something like the AMS Lite. The AMS Lite has these like cartridges that hold the filament, and they seem to really lock around it nicely. It's just so much easier to get good results on the AMS Lite, at least in my experience. The AMS is such a good and awful device all at the same time. I wouldn't be without it, because when I come to print stuff like this Ghost, for example, which has got all of this printed in one bit, you've got the black shoes, the white shoelaces, and then the rest of it's white. There's loads of other stuff that I printed in multiple colors. It is so good. When it works, it's just mind-blowingly good. But the problem is it doesn't always work, and it's just fidgety, and it needs upgrading. And again, hopefully there will be an AMS2 unit that comes out next year. And if they can fix the issues and the teething bits on the standard AMS, the stuff that we've got now, then that will make it just an absolute, yes, you should buy this with it. At the moment, if you need that functionality, if you want that multi-filament printing, it is so good. And it's so nice as well being able to have 4 different types of filaments just loaded and ready to go. So that way, if you're a business, for example, and you print off things in different colors at different times, maybe you do your terrain in gray, you do your ghosts in white, you do something else in orange, rather than having to come out to the machine every time and load up a different filament, you literally just choose the color that you want to print it in the software, and then it prints it off. It's really good for that. So the AMS is fantastic when it works, but it is not without its flaws. Also, whilst we're on the subject of AMS, there's a lot of wastage as well. So if I move my printers, there is, in fact, let's have a look. There will be loads of it, I'm sure. I've not really cleaned this up. Oh, here it is. Ah! Poop, printer poop. Lots and lots of printer poop. So what this does is when the filament is purging, so it's swapping between the different colors, it poops out loads of the old stuff, loads in the new stuff, poops out some of the new stuff, and then ejects it from the printer. It also does what's called a purge tower. So it makes sure that everything's clean, and it builds up this purge tower as it's doing the prints. If you're printing just one thing in multicolor, what you'll find is you'll just have loads and loads and loads of waste. Sometimes you'll waste as much filament as you use on the model itself. If you're printing multiple things, all the same, with all the different multicolor bits, so I don't know, if we take these ghosts, for example, and they were smaller, and you were printing a thing of 20, you will have the exact same amount of waste as you would if you only printed one. So just a tip, if you do get one of these, it's better to print off multiple things in multicolor, so long as the same model, same colors and everything, because you get the same amount of waste between them. So just that there. But there is a lot of waste, and it's worthwhile just being aware of that. So that's the good, the meh, and the downright ugly. And in all honesty, like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I feel as though almost every tabletop hobbyist could benefit from at least having something like the A1 Mini or the A1. They're relatively inexpensive now. You know, I think you can get the A1 Mini currently on sale for about £170, and then the A1 is about £260. That's a really, really good value proposition for something like this. It's relatively easy to use, they're very fast, and they give great quality. And if you're doing things like terrain and stuff like that, for your tabletop hobbying, it is an amazing machine. And you can't really go too far wrong with any of them. Like I said, I'm not going to get into the full breakdown of these, like what the benefits are of the P1S. There are some more where you can print with different types of material. For example, you've got the heated enclosure. But the base models that you get, the quality is as good as the P1S and the P1P. At least in my experience it is. I can't distinguish between them. They're really good machines. So if you are a tabletop hobbyist, yeah, you should definitely look at one of these, at least in my opinion. There's so many different things you could do. Game aids, different bits of terrain, there's just so much. It is so much fun, and I would rather have an FDM printer than my resin printers, even though the channel is mostly built on resin 3D printing. But yeah, let's move on from that very quickly. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Are you considering getting an FDM printer? Are you considering one of the Bambu Lab printers? Like I said, these haven't been sent over to me. I've bought them all myself. Bambu Labs have never spoken to me before. I have emailed them a couple of times and said, hey, do you guys want to work together or something? I, get quite a few views on these. They ignore me, so there we go. But all in all, you can't go too far wrong. They have some teething issues. Most of these are first generation. I think they've done a really good job since kind of landing with their big premium machines, and they're coming out of the mid-tier, and then they're sort of like budget machines as well. And there are other things to consider. Always do your own research as well. So with Bambu Labs, a lot of their stuff is more proprietary. Your many use a lot of their filaments. They have their own software. It's a little bit more locked down. But all in all, I use loads of different filaments with these, and the vast majority of them work perfectly fine. You don't have to use the Bambu Lab filaments. Getting their parts is relatively inexpensive. It's easy to do. They're very open in terms of showing you how to, rip these down and fix things. But it is always worthwhile bearing in mind that they are a little bit more locked down than some of the other, printers that you can tinker around with. So thanks so much for watching. Hope that video has helped. If you've got any questions, throw them down below. I'll have some more videos coming up in the future about my guide to how I print terrain, because apparently you guys want that, so I will get that put together. But in the meantime, hit that like and subscribe button. Come along for some more content in the future, and hopefully I will see you soon. Take care. Bye.